Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study of the entire Bible. We on a new book, Ezra. And with this book, I'm going to take some time here to explain some things that is to me utmost important. One, understanding prophecy. Two, understanding God's purpose. And then what's going on here with Ezra? Now, when we closed out Second Chronicles last time, one of the things that Second Chronicles did was it brought us to the Babylonian invasion and then jumped 70 years. This is where we are with Ezra. I kind of back up and then let's kind of unpack this because I think it's important to understand. I think if you understand some of the, this is kind of a sidebar issue here. If you understand some of the basic principles of prophecy, you will dodge a lot of misinformation and confusion about end times and all of that kind of stuff there when people ask crazy questions about end times. Well, this is sort of the kind of seeds of understanding biblical prophecy. And while we're not going to do a deep dive into biblical prophecy, I certainly want to unpack some things here that not only help us understand where we are with Ezra, but somewhat some of the things, like I said, because we're not doing a deep dive, but some things of understanding biblical prophecy. So I'm going to just kind of dip our toe in the lake, as it were. Now, as I said, Ezra is 70 years after Nebuchadnezzar invades Jerusalem. Now, why is that important? It's important because right now things have changed. The world has changed. From this historic standpoint, the world has changed. Before the Babylonian Empire, and if you look at it from a global standpoint, remember the biblical narrative only focuses on Israel primarily, with a very specific emphasis on the bloodline of Jesus. So what happens is that, there's a whole entire world that's going on that the biblical narrative just doesn't focus on. Now, what you have, as I said before, we haven't gotten to this section of the Old Testament yet, what is called the writings of the prophets. In fact, I think I will bring it up here. The writings of the prophets. And let me show you from the Bible app here. Let me shoot over here since this is over there. Okay, so the Bible app. Now this is the the Old Testament. So let me break this down as we have been studying. So to date, we've gone from Genesis, all the way down to, I'm still here. Oh, yeah, I can't see this. I'm about to scroll up. I'm looking at my screen here. Okay, so we have gone all the way up to Genesis to Chronicles. All right, and as you can see there, Second Chronicles. That's not what I wanted to do. All right, let me go back here. All right, I can't see this here. All right. So here's the thing here. All the way down to Chronicles. That's where we left off. Okay. So where we are headed is these next three books here to Esther. Now, this narrative right here, that section is a historical narrative that brings us to this time. This Esther is going to be in a period of time where after this period of time, you go through what is called the intertestament period. So if I keep going, scrolling down, Malachi is the end of the Old Testament period. Now, these three books here, okay, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, they are around the same period of time as Esther. So when we come to Malachi, and it's only, again, the same period of time as Esther, this begins an approximate 500-year, what's called dark period. There's no prophetic word. In other words, it's almost like things go dark for 500 years. And then after that, then you come up upon this here, Matthew, okay, the New Testament, okay. All right, so what's important about Chronicles here, okay? What's important about Chronicles, all right? So at the end of this period, so now let me go to the other section. Now, as we move forward, of course, in the Old Testament, when we come to Esther, we will conclude with the historical portion, and then you have Job, Psalm, Proverbs, Ecclesiastic, and then the Songs of Solomon. These are called the books of literature and wisdom, okay? And then, by the way, these are all in a certain order too. Job actually being the oldest book in the Bible. All right, so then we come to Isaiah. Okay, so when we come to Isaiah, this is the time of King Hezekiah, if you remember, right around that time. Now, Hezekiah is about, where is my chart? Let me just show you here. Hezekiah, let's go down because I want you to see a timeline here. So these are the kings of Israel, as we saw. We've been using this chart here, but look at the kings of Judah. So I want you to see the timeline of Hezekiah. Okay, 727 to 798 BC. So Zedekiah becomes the last king of Judah. And this is the time when Nebuchadnezzar destroys Israel. So look at this timeline here, 586. So around this time here, right? So between 586, so you can say 586, right? Now or 597, which is the beginning. Hezekiah, we're looking at what? A period of about 100 years, right? Forgive my math here. But you can see the timeline. Let me do a quick thing here, guys, because all right, so Hezekiah, I'll use this date at around the beginning. 727. Thank God for calculators, because my mind is not thinking here. To 597. About 130 years, okay? About 130 years. Now, why is that important? That is important because this is when the prophetic timeline begins. And that's important. That's important. The prophetic timeline, okay? I'm doing another calculation here. Okay. All right, so depending on what calculations I do. All right, so this timeline is important. Isaiah the prophet, that's why I want you to see that. He comes along and sing around this time. So anywhere from 100 to about 120 years, God begins his prophetic clock. God begins his prophetic word against Israel. Not too long after this, by the way, the northern kingdoms. Let me go back to my chart here so I can show you. Now remember this chart here, where where are we at? Okay, this chart here, where you have the northern kingdoms and then you have the southern kingdoms, right? If you go to the top, Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, does a foolish move, and he splits the kingdom. So now you got two kingdoms, a north and the south kingdom. Both are Israel, both are the descendants of Abraham, both should be under the law of Moses, but they're not. You have this split kingdom all the way until actually Hosea. And just to show you again the time of Hosea. Now look at his timeline. He is around 740. Now if you remember, let me scroll down. 740. This is the time around Hezekiah. Now why am I going through all this here? Because Ahaz is probably around the time when this kingdom of Israel began to fall. So around this time, the kingdom of Israel had been deported to Assyria. All right. So now Isaiah pops up during the same time as Hezekiah. He begins a prophetic work warning them judgment is coming. Now understand this. That would be like Isaiah showing up in 1922 and beginning to warn the people prophetically. Okay. Now, so this prophetic time, now also, and this is how we will study the Old Testament, when you think about Hosea, let me bring this down here. So Hosea, these was called the minor prophets. I don't particularly like that designation, and I really don't like how they divided it. However, but these, what's called the writings of the prophets, are divided into major and minor prophets. Okay, here's the problem. Not understanding Hosea all the way down to Zephaniah. Okay, they are around the same time frame as Isaiah. Okay, that's just Bible trivia right here. In other words, but the point is that God begins to warn Israel of coming doom. All right, so that coming doom happened, right, with King Zedekiah and Nebuchadnezzar. Now, all of that is important to understanding, okay, where we are. So let's go back to Chronicles right here, right? At the end of Chronicles, we see Babylon being invaded. We'll see that in the writings of Jeremiah. Jeremiah shows up about 23 years before Nebuchadnezzar. He's warning the people. They ignore. They still continue in their sin. Jeremiah then is that prophet, that major prophet, that actually sees the death of the nation. Okay, the death of the nation. Daniel and Ezekiel prophecy is during the 70 years. I'll get back to that 70 years in a moment. Okay. All right. So what you have is at the end of Chronicles, then you see the death of the nation, and then Chronicles does something different. Is that it tells you the death of the nation, and then it jumps 70 years. In fact, let me go over there, and let me go over there and do a quick recap, because again, to me, this is kind of important. This is important to understand where I want to go. All right, so we see, I'm going to start reading verse 15 again. It says, "But Yahweh, the God of their ancestors, sent word against them by the hand of his messenger, sending them time and time again." Remember, starting with Isaiah. "For he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place." Again, let me just stop because I don't want to get too far. But that, remember, remember that this dwelling place here, okay, compassion, okay. God is more compassionate, as I said, than he is judgment. just so we know, he has been prophesying over 100 years for them to return. Okay. Verse 16, but they kept ridiculing God's messenger, despising his words, and scoffing at his prophets, until the Lord's wrath was so stirred up against the people that there was no remedy. So he brought up against him the king of the Chaldeans, who killed their choice men with the sword in their houses of their sanctuary. He had no pity on the young men or young women, elderly or aged. He handed them all over to Israel. As I said, Nebuchadnezzar's invasion was cruel, brutal. And part of the reasons, even when God told them if they would just surrender, it would go well with them, they didn't even, with the troops outside invading them, they still rebelled against God. Verse 19, then the Chaldeans burned God's temple, tore down Jerusalem's wall. Keep that in mind, because that's going to be very important to our next two books. They tore down Jerusalem's wall, burned down all its palaces, and destroyed the valuable order. Let me go back, actually, and I want to read verse 18 again. It says, he took everything to Babylon, the articles of God's temple, large and small, the treasures of God's temple, and the treasures of the king and his officials. So again, this is going to be very important to Ezra and Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah. The Chaldeans burned down God's temple. Verse 19, they tore down Jerusalem's wall, burned down all its palaces, destroyed all its valuable articles. Now that's going to be important, because that's where we're going to end up in Ezra, rebuilding the temple. And then Nehemiah is going to come and talk about rebuilding the wall. Verse 20, he deported those who escaped with the sword of Babylon, and became servants to him and his sons unto the rise of the Persian kingdom. Now this is important here. To the rise of the Persian kingdom. This is to fulfill the word of the Lord through Jeremiah. And the land enjoyed its Sabbath's rest all the days of its desolation, until 70 years were fulfilled. Now, I want to focus on this prophecy here. This prophecy, where we're at. This is where we're at here. When he says that verse, I'll come back to that in a moment, actually probably in the next study. Look, let me finish out verse 22. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, the word of the Lord spoken through Jeremiah was fulfilled. The Lord put it in the mind of King Cyrus of Persia to issue a proclamation throughout his entire kingdom, and also to put it in writing. This is what the King Cyrus of Persia, king of Persia, said. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all kingdoms of the earth, and has appointed me to build him a temple at Jerusalem in Judah, and wherever among all of his people may go up. Wherever among you of his people may go up, may the Lord his God be with them. Now we're getting into this in the next study. What is interesting and amazing about this, notice, is that you have the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. Again, I'm going to get into that in the next study, because I think it's important to understand this here. And it's plain and simple message. Okay. Prophecy is very easy to understand. Men mess it up. The problem with prophecy, it's exhaustive. There's a lot of it, and one should always kind of compare and study all of it. But the message is simple. In other words, this message right here is very simple. What is amazing about this here is that you have 4 kingdoms. We will get into this in the next study, but the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. Notice what King Cyrus says. The Lord God of heaven has given me. Now here is a pagan kingdom, not Israel, recognizing the true God, saying he's given me, right? Look at verse 22 again. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, the word of the Lord spoken through Jeremiah was fulfilled. The Lord put it in the mind of King Cyrus, and that's important. He recognized this. God gave me this, the true God. So right here, one of the things that we see that change, and one of the vehicles that God would use is these kings of these world empires where the knowledge of God, the true God, is spread throughout the world. Not just pagan, but the true God. And we see it through these kingdoms here. All right, guys. Look, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought, a comment, add it to the comment section below. We're going to pick this up in part 2, actually, of this study here. We're going to pick this up because, again, to me, we're at a pivotal point in human history, biblical history, and understanding. Don't forget to like and subscribe too. All right, guys, see you in the next